IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Tuesday, October 8th. We are out of the bye, and the best part of this crazy weekend of upsets was that Notre Dame didn't play this weekend, and there was no chance they were going to get upset. What a wild weekend of college football. And one matchup between ranked teams, and it turned into a weekend of absolute craziness. A lot of it impacted Notre Dame positively. Coming up to another huge weekend on the college football docket. I think there's like 4 or 5 games between ranked opponents. And, of course, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish have a rivalry game this weekend. Trevor, my man Trevor Trowbridge is joining me today. I'm Brian Driscoll, as you guys know. And we're going to talk about this matchup between Notre Dame and Stanford, Trevor. And we're going to have a really fun week breaking this down because this is a very intriguing football team because in some ways they're not very good. In other ways, they actually kind of concern me, and we're going to talk about that. This is a rivalry game. This is a much better Stanford team than the one that beat Notre Dame 2 years ago, even though they're still not that good. So we're going to talk about that. Today we're going to kind of talk big picture about the game and dive into some of the matchup parts of it. Tomorrow, we'll get into more of the statistical matchups, more of the micro aspect of this breakdown. We'll talk game records. And, of course, Trevor, it's Wednesday. It's buy, sell, hold, right? So we'll have that tomorrow. Thursday, we will do we'll have our keys to victory. We'll do our predictions for the game. And then Bill Bender and I will then preview the huge weekend of college football this weekend, man. I think we're predicting 4 games. I normally try to keep it to 2 or 3, and we're going to predict 4 because it's I don't know which one not to do. So we'll preview all that. And, of course, Friday mailbag before we have the big game on Saturday. So Notre Dame and Stanford on Saturday, 3:30 p.m. on NBC and Peacock. Notre Dame is currently a 22.5-point favorite. I never like those kind of spreads because, they're just the ones where Notre Dame just doesn't seem to cover those ones. They cover a lot of the other ones. But 22.5-point spread as of today was 23.5 yesterday. Stanford is 2-3 on the season so far, Trevor. And it's it's a rivalry that I did not grow up with as a rivalry. It didn't really become a quote-unquote rivalry until the 90s, meaning that Notre Dame played Stanford when I was a kid. As a matter of fact, lost a couple times to Stanford during the Lou Holtz era, lost once to a Dennis Green coach football team, and then lost again to a Bill Walsh coach football team. And now it's in the late 90s. It became a game that's an every-year game. It was dominated by Notre Dame for a long time. And then this dude, Jim Harbaugh, showed up with this cat named David Shaw to one side. And he had, I'm trying to remember the name of the D coordinator they had on the other side. He was the head coach for the Broncos. I cannot believe I'm drawing a blank here on this deal. But, they became a much different football team during that time, Trevor. Brian Kelly actually finished his career, I believe, with a losing record against Stanford. If I remember correctly, he ended his career with a losing record against Stanford. I'm actually going to look that up. So from 2010 to the time Brian Kelly departed in 2021, let's see here. Stanford went 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Yep, 6-5 or 5-6, 5-6 against Stanford. So Brian Kelly did not have very many teams he had a losing record against outside of the Bamas, the Georgias, teams like that. But this is one he had a losing record on, 5-6. And I don't think he beat a single Stanford. He beat one Stanford team, I believe, that finished the year ranked in the top 25. Maybe 2. I think the 2018 might have finished. The 2012 team, I believe, is the only Stanford team that finished the season ranked in the top 25. So I'm actually going to look that up as well. But they had a couple years where they beat teams that weren't ranked very high. In 2012, they finished 7th. 2014, they finished unranked. 2015, they lost to them. 2016, they lost to them. 2017, they finished 20th and Notre Dame lost them. And then they did not finish the season ranked in 2018. So Brian Kelly only beat one Stanford team that finished the season ranked in the top 25. So that was a rivalry game that Notre Dame got dominated early on, had a little bit better success later in the year. And it became, Trevor, during that period of time, a rivalry that meant a lot more than it ever had. Stanford starting to beat Notre Dame for recruits and all those type of things. And so now we're in a situation where Notre Dame has an opportunity to once again take over control of this series. But it's not going to be easy, Trevor. This is going to be a game where we're going to learn a lot about this Notre Dame football team, not just from what they do on the field, but how are they up here and how are they right here coming out of a bye against an inferior opponent. This is one of those games where if you overlook them, like they did 2 years ago, it can get a little bit tricky. If you take the game seriously, then you should be able to roll. And so we're going to find out a lot about this Notre Dame football team coming out of this game. So let's dive into what's at stake for this game, Trevor. And we talked about it. It's a rivalry game. It's interesting that we're calling it that because, honestly, when I was a kid, I never would have thought this is a rival for Notre Dame. But here we are. I think the Jim Harbaugh era and then the David Shaw era has changed things a bit. And now we're going to find out, Trevor, moving forward, if this is going to remain a rivalry. Notre Dame is not, and Stanford do not have each other scheduled, I believe, past next season. So we're going to find out here real soon if this remains a rivalry. But this is, as I mentioned, Trevor, the biggest thing about this game, this is an opportunity, big picture, not about the 2024 season, but big picture, this is an opportunity for Notre Dame to retake control of this series. They've won 4 of the last 5. They obviously won last year 56-23, although they were losing for a chunk of the first half. Lost that game in 2022. You've won 4 out of 5. It should be 5 in a row had you not choked that game away. Can you win this one and make it 5 out of 6 and then 2 in a row, and then you can kind of make the 22 game an anomaly? Or do you struggle again and you realize that this Notre Dame football team hasn't changed? It is still a team that one week can look great. Another week can go on, can come out and beat a ranked football team, can go on the road and beat a ranked football team, but they can drop games like this. So is this going to be like 22 again, Trevor, where you drop the game early to a Marshall, Northern Illinois type of team? You seem to get things back on track. You win 3 in a row, and then boom, what happens? You lose to a team like Stanford, which is exactly what happened for Notre Dame in 2022, Trevor. Notre Dame comes out, loses their first 2 games, and then they did what? They won 3 in a row. They had a win over a ranked team in BYU. They go home the next week, and boom, a Stanford team whose only win in a calendar year was over Colgate beat you at home. And that's what we're going to learn is, are they finally starting to get past that version of Notre Dame that can look great, smashing North Carolina and Drake May on the road, can go on a neutral field, convincingly beat BYU, more convincingly than the final score might show, and then come home, and then that's what we see. That's the first big picture thing that's at stake for this game, Trevor. This is going to tell us a lot about where this team is from a focus and a maturity standpoint.
I think it's easy to look at this matchup and say, yeah, Stanford's 2-3, doesn't bring a whole lot to the table. Well, historically, based on what the perception of Marcus Freeman is, these are the games that he drops. Now, there are signs that point in a positive direction. Marcus Freeman is 3-0 coming off of a bye week. Notre Dame, after a slow start, handled Stanford last year on the road, which, grand scheme of the series history, I believe Notre Dame didn't get a win at Stanford. They won at Stanford in 2007, and then won again at Stanford in 2019. And outside of that, I don't think they won on the road. So
you are
if
correct.
You're anything, yeah,
that
so
was
if
a
you're
3-9 Stanford team. It wasn't even a good Stanford team yet.
Yeah. So if you're anything like me, I am happy that this game is taking place in South Bend. I always just get that weird feeling when Notre Dame goes to play Stanford in California. So you hit the nail on the head there, Bryan. This has a chance for Notre Dame to course correct and kind of start putting some of those games that we want to start labeling as an anomaly behind them. Because up to this point, it's kind of a flip of a coin what Notre Dame team is going to show up when they do play the 2-3 teams of the world. Because let's call a spade here. Stanford, despite the fact that they are in some areas improved from where they were at last year, this is still not the greatest football team. So Notre Dame has a lot of chances to kind of rewrite the narrative with what people view at a national level of this program, that they'll show up for the big games and they'll sleepwalk through the easier games on the schedule. Because this is a Stanford team that has the potential to hurt you. I know we'll dive into it later in this show, and I'm excited to start getting to it, Bryan.
Trevor, when you talk about the matchup, it is interesting, though. Playing out there was kind of a problem. I mean, it really was. My first game watching Notre Dame at Stanford was 2011, and they lost that game. I was not out there for the 13 game. I was out there for the 15 game, and I was out there for the 17 game. So I watched 3 straight losses in California. Now, fortunately for Notre Dame, they've won their last 3 at Stanford, and all by convincing margins, but it does make you a little bit nervous, especially since this is a better version of those Stanford teams. This is by no means a vintage Stanford team, guys. They're 2-3. They just got beat by 24 points at home to Virginia Tech. I'm not going to try to spin this that this is a good Stanford team. What I am going to say is this is a dangerous Stanford team if you don't come into this game and play locked-in football. And that's the point Trevor and I are making here is this is a team that can beat you in the same way Northern Illinois beat you, in the way that Stanford beat you 2 years ago, the way that Marshall beat you. I shouldn't even say Marshall because Marshall is still a good football team and actually had much better NFL talent on both sides of the ball, I believe, than what Northern Illinois did this year and certainly what Stanford did 2 years ago. So it's one of those games where if you bring the same energy you brought against Northern Illinois, you seem to bring the same energy you had against Miami, Ohio, this game could be a lot more competitive than it's supposed to be. This is a game where if Notre Dame comes out locked in, however, this won't be a competitive game. I mean, again, we try to always be on. We don't try. We're always honest with you guys. And we're not going to sit here and try to convince you that this is going to be a really competitive game and Stanford's got this and Stanford's got that. And if Notre Dame brings their A game, it's going to be a dogfight for 60 minutes. If Notre Dame plays B+ football, this will be a minimum 2-touchdown game. Minimum 2-touchdown game. But that was also true for Northern Illinois. If they would have brought a B game, they win that game by 10 points at least. Yeah. And so that's the thing where we're at with this matchup, Trevor, is this is a team that you should be convincingly, but a team that can be dangerous. Like, look, I just watched a week ago, sitting on my couch, hanging out, no Notre Dame game, and I'm watching an inferior Vanderbilt team. And I mean inferior, like, look, Vanderbilt played great in that game and did not fear Alabama, battled their butts off the whole game. But this is also a Vanderbilt team that 3 weeks before lost to Georgia State. That, 2 weeks before lost in overtime to a Missouri team that I don't think is that good. So I believe Vanderbilt's better than Stanford, but they're not on the same level as Bama. But Bama came in, not focused, not locked in, and they got beat. I saw a Tennessee team that has a superior roster to Arkansas get punched in the mouth and not respond well and lose that game, right? I mean, we see this a lot, and we've especially seen it in this season where inferior rosters who have an infusion of players that just don't fear the big boys like they used to. And they say, well, Northern Illinois came into the stadium with no fear of Notre Dame. Miami came into the stadium with no fear of Notre Dame. Stanford will come into this game, Trevor, with no fear of Notre Dame because there's going to be a decent amount of kids on this roster that were at the game 2 years ago and then are going to, the coaches are going to spin it. Like, guys, we had a 16-14 lead late in the second quarter against Notre Dame last year, and then we started turning the ball over. We had these mistakes. We had those mistakes. We had a blocked kick, that which is all true. They're not going to come into the stadium afraid of Notre Dame. This is going to have to be a game that Notre Dame is going to earn, Trevor. And if they're able to earn a convincing win, then we say, okay, this is another step in the right direction. Not that they beating Stanford in and of itself convincingly isn't like a bring on, Texas or Ohio State, but it says, okay, they're turning the corner. They're putting that other mess behind them. And they're going to, it's another step towards saying, hey, maybe they are finally getting to the point where, this is a locked in football team. And the other thing too, Trevor, this will tie, if they're able to win this game, this will tie the longest regular season winning streak in Marcus Freeman's tenure. It'll be the fourth win for Notre Dame. Last season, their longest winning streak was 4. And in 2022, their longest winning – oh, I'm sorry. I'm incorrect. 5. They had 5 in a row in 2022. So I take that back. So they're still one game away from that. But it goes to show that this is not a team that's been able to string together long winning streaks under Marcus Freeman. They just have, 3-4 games, boom. 3-4 games, boom. Can they avoid that against Stanford? And that's what I'm saying. It's not about Stanford. It's about Notre Dame. And it's about, is Notre Dame going to say, okay, we don't care about the team on the other sideline from the standpoint of obviously there's a respect there. You got to study them. But this is about us playing to our quote-unquote gold standard, which they chant every day in practice and chant in the log. No, TGS, the gold standard. Well, are you going to live up to that? regardless of who's on the other side. Because that's the thing. This team is good about living up to that when they're playing at Texas A&M and to a degree playing at Louisville. And Ohio State comes to town and they're going to play their butts off in that game. But can you also do that when Stanford's coming to town? When you watch the film and there's a dangerous team in some regards, but this is also a team we should beat convincingly. Can you do it then? That's the first big picture aspect that I'm looking for in this game, Trevor, to tell us where's this Notre Dame team mentally and emotionally and from a focus standpoint to say, hey, we're going to take care of this game.
Well, if last weekend showed you anything, right, it's that any team can be beat on any Saturday. And for Notre Dame, if you go back and you look at the painful losses, yes, Marshall was a better team than some of the aforementioned teams that we had brought up, but it's still Marshall. You're still Notre Dame. So you think of the Marshall loss, the Northern Illinois loss, the close win against Toledo, the close win against Cal, like all of these games historically, you start to get in the conversation of it is more of a Notre Dame versus a Notre Dame type of game. Not to disrespect any of the opponents that are and have been on the schedule and that will be on the schedule, but these are the games where Marcus Freeman needs to start turning around, where Notre Dame can't beat Notre Dame. And I firmly believe that that's not on Saturday on the field. That happens in preparation. That happens the week of. And so Marcus Freeman, especially now with the bye week, has the opportunity to take the first step to change that narrative. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that if Marcus Freeman comes out and beats Stanford by 2 touchdowns and everybody's going to forget the bad losses. No, that's never going to go away. But you can slowly start putting those farther back in the rear view mirror, which has to be top of mind for this team, because now you have a 3-game stretch before your next bye week to really start putting away opponents. Bryan, you and I talked about it. The eye test is going to start being huge for Notre Dame, because as of right now, I don't think Notre Dame has another ranked opponent on their schedule. So not only do you have to go in and win, you have to go in and now win by a lot. And you have to prove that you are that dominant team.
They will have probably some ranked teams when they play. Yeah. I would imagine Navy or Army are going to be ranked when they play. If you look at their schedules, and USC, Army, and Navy are 3 of the 4 highest ranked teams in the others receiving votes category. But let's be honest, Trevor. A win over a ranked Army or ranked Navy is not something you're going to hang your – if you're hanging your resume on that, then your resume is not great. Now, USC, I think, is going to get back in there. I mean, we'll see what they do against Penn State this week. And they beat Penn State at home this weekend, and all of a sudden, boom, they're in the top 20 again, right? I mean, so there's a lot of that. But your point stands is you're now relying on other people to win games so you can get style points. Here's the style points you need to get. Go out there and smack people. Just punish people. And that's what Notre Dame needs to learn how to do. And you don't do that by saying, well, we've got to get style points. You do that by saying, we are going to play to our standard. We're going to play hard-nosed, physical football with focus, intensity, and passion because we're Notre Dame, not because we're playing Texas A&M. And that's where the leadership of this football team needs to take over, Trevor, because – and it starts at the coaching level, but it also has to go down to the player level. Like, look, it's easy to blame Marcus Freeman for that. And, of course, there are things Marcus Freeman could have done differently and should have done differently in preparation for Northern Illinois. But as someone who played college football at a lower level, who's coached in college football, who has been around these Notre Dame football teams for years, the best Notre Dame teams that I saw and covered were self-motivated football teams. They were teams that said, we don't care about what coach does. We don't care about what this guy does. We're going to go out there and ball because that's who we are. And those are things that you look at and say, where is the leadership on the player level at for this weekend as well? Because if you come out with that intensity, with that chip on your shoulder, yeah, the coaches can enhance that a little bit, Trevor. But if you guys are coming in there with poor player leadership, at some point in time, that what the coaches do don't matter. That's a general statement. I'm not saying Notre Dame has poor player leadership. I'm using it as an example. If you have good player leadership, then there's going to be a lot of accountability with the way you're preparing and the energy and the emotion you're showing in practice. I mean, there should be situations where if a captain should be able to go up to Coach Freeman, like, Coach, man, we need to bring this in real quick. This is bull crap. And then Coach needs to let that happen. Or you get in the locker room and say, everybody in the locker room right now, you know what I mean? And you say, look, this is unacceptable. There's got to be that too, because when this team plays with an edge, they're very dangerous. We saw that early against Louisville 2 weeks ago. But here's the deal. A little adversity hit, you fumble a ball, your quarterback gets his wind knocked down, and all of a sudden, okay, let's just get into win this game mode and get out of here. And then all of a sudden Louisville starts coming back. And I want to see this team come out with an edge from a player standpoint, but also from a coaching standpoint. Yeah. And that's kind of the final piece of this intro section, Trevor, is, look, Notre Dame and Stanford have this long history, and Notre Dame, I think, is 23 and 14 all time against Stanford. And 8 of those 14 wins came from 2009 on, but there's some Stanford teams that ruined some really good potential Notre Dame seasons under Lou Holtz. But this, again, is not a Stanford team that is like those teams. This isn't an Andrew Luck coached led football team. This is one of those games where, yes, it's a rivalry and all this other kind of stuff, but this is one of those, this is about us games. And part of that is the head coach also can't tamp down the expectations or the play. He's got to come out and say, hey, we are going to be aggressive in this game. Coordinators, I'm demanding early dominance. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean throwing bombs. That's not what I mean by aggressive. But you're coming out with an attitude of we're taking it to you on both sides of the ball. And there was a comment that Marcus Freeman made, Trevor, in the press conference that gave me hope that he is going to look at this game a little differently than he did in Northern Illinois. And I'll read you the quote that he said. He was kind of introing the Stanford game. And I always get a little bit nervous about games like this because you wonder, okay, where's the head coach's mind at? Is he going to be like, hey, we just got to focus on us and all this other kind of stuff, which is fine. I mean, you do need to do that.
Sure.
And how's he going to feel about the game from 2 years ago? Is it kind of out of his mind? Does he not think about it? Is he doesn't want to bring it up? It's like it's in the past. He said this comment this is not being asked a question. This was before Q&A started. This is his intro to the press conference. Marcus Freeman said, obviously, 2 years ago, they came in here and they beat us. And last year in the second quarter, we were down, I think, 14-13 at one point. So we really have to prepare. I was really happy when I heard that comment because I'm like, okay, he's not going to try to get them to pretend the last 2 years didn't happen. And that's partly why they came in with an edge against Louisville because they were not pretending we're not worried about last year. This is a different team. No, you use that emotional push to get your team focused on payback. Hey, guys, last time that team, and that was a worse team than the one we're playing now. Now, I'd leave out the part that we're better than we were then if I'm Marcus Freeman, right? That's but this is a better Stanford team than the one that beat us 2 years ago. We went into that week. We sleptwalked through that week. We made excuses. We thought we were hot stuff. We had beaten this team. We'd beaten BYU. We'd smacked North Carolina. We had righted the ship, and we were good. We were golden. We were cruising again. And we let that team come into us and push us around for 60 minutes, and which they did. I mean, they absolutely did. And last year we came out again thinking we were going to roll this team and et cetera, et cetera. That's good because as I said before the Louisville game, and I'm going to say it again, Marcus Freeman's better when he's pissed off. This football team is better when they're kind of got something to be pissed about, whether it's disrespect from the media or being booed by the fans or getting paid. I don't care what the motivation is. I just want you pissed off. I mean, that's my thing, Trevor, because when this team is pissed off, we get a version of Notre Dame that is very hard to beat for anyone in college football, even with all the injuries. Like, think about this, Trevor. We got a pissed off version of Notre Dame against Louisville, okay? And I was talking to somebody last night about this. Do y'all realize the circumstances of that Louisville game? That's a good Louisville football team. Well, they just lost to SMU. You mean the SMU team whose only loss is a 3-point road loss to a current undefeated team that's in the top 20 in BYU, who blew out Florida State the week before, who blew out TCU 2 weeks before that or a week before that? Okay, it's a bad loss for Louisville. They were at home, but that's a good SMU football team. And there was a little bit of a letdown game from Louisville because they put so much into the Notre Dame game. But here's the thing. You were missing 3 starting offensive linemen. You were missing the guy that had been your best tight end through the first 4 games of the season. You were missing your starting Viper. You're missing one of your key rotation players at D tackle. Your replacement starting Viper gets hurt in the second quarter. Your starting middle linebacker gets hurt, or will linebacker gets hurt in the first half. He's hobbling around the whole first and second quarter. He's out in the second half. And your starting cornerback, who'd been playing excellent football so far this season, is out for the game. You had all that out. And then Jadarian Price, your best big play weapon, let's be real, it's your best big play weapon, gets benched in the second quarter and doesn't come back in the game. Effectively the same as an injury, no longer playing. And that football team still went out and beat a ranked football team in a game they controlled. And I made this point to a friend. So, look, I don't like that they kind of, packed it in. And he's like, well, the offense. I said, look, I get all that. But here's the reality of it. Every time Louisville made it a game, Notre Dame went down and scored. So like, yeah, I didn't like that they did this and did that, but you were missing all that. Oh, and by the way, you were also missing Josh Burnham, who had been your best big end in the first 2 games before he got hurt. But
Ben Morrison for a couple series.
That's right. So because that team was focused and a little bit pissed and all the different things, we saw a version of that team that said, okay, don't care about all this. No excuses for all this. We're going to go out here and we're going to get this thing done. If we can get that emotional version of this team back on this week, you're getting Burnham back. Oh, by the way, Jordan Faison also got knocked out of that game, right? I mean, so you get Burnham back, you get Christian Gray back, maybe you get Cooper Flanagan back. Now it's like, hey, guys, you're getting some reinforcements coming in here. Now it's time to go out there and handle business. And so that's why I say, Trevor, man, we're going to learn a lot about where this team is because I don't care who's missing from Notre Dame's lineup. If they go out and play Notre Dame football, this is a win. And that's just the reality of it. But as we've seen, we don't always get this team playing Notre Dame football. Or we could say Notre Dame football is this. And honestly, that's kind of been true. So that's why I say, like, I want to see – it's easy to get up for Louisville. They were highly ranked and, undefeated. Can this team emotionally get up for a team like Stanford as well? That's going to tell us a lot about where this team's head is coming into this matchup.
I think you touched on it. The win against Louisville for Notre Dame was so huge in that it instilled the confidence in them that they have playmakers at every position that can come in and step up and perform, not just go and fill a void on the depth chart, but can come in. And there's almost like there's no lapse in performance. Like you and I have said, like a lot of people have said with Irish Breakdown through, looking at past Notre Dame teams, you have a guy get injured and there is a clear drop-off in performance with what happens. I mean, look at the playoff game against Clemson when Julian Love gets hurt. You had at one point in the time in the game against Louisville, Ben Morrison was in the locker room. Christian Gray was sidelined with an injury. You have a true freshman in Leonard Moore playing boundary and Jordan Clark, your nickel, playing field corner. And the defense still performed. Look, it's moments like that have to instill confidence in a football team, which makes me believe that when you go into weeks like this, it instills the confidence in you to say, yeah, we can go out and beat anybody. Not saying that they're looking at this Stanford team saying, yo, based on how we played against Louisville, now we have a shot to beat Stanford. Not saying that at all. I'm saying now it's going to start giving you the confidence of now we're going to start beating teams like how we should go out and beat teams. And that's one of the things that I really hope that Notre Dame does moving forward with this next 3-game stretch here. And I think you hit the nail on the head perfectly with Marcus Freeman. I hope he opens up the coaching staff. And that comment that he made in the opening press conference gave me a little bit of hope and confidence that that's going to be the case. But what I'm going to be looking for on top of Notre Dame does a halfway decent job of starting the game on offense relatively quickly. They've scored on more opening drives this season than not. It's what's that going to start to look like midway through the second quarter and starting the third quarter. I want the foot on the gas pedal for 4 quarters. Not, all right, cool, we're up by 2 touchdowns. We're good at any point in the game. So what I'm going to be looking to see from Marcus Freeman and the staff on Saturday. So they have a chance to start course correcting and changing that narrative. And I hope that they do it.
So, Trevor, that's going to do it for section 1. We're going to next dive into kind of a look at the Notre Dame offense and then the Notre Dame defense and the matchup against Stanford, kind of what we've seen from Stanford and what's at stake for these sides of the ball, too. So we'll do those 2 sections next. But before we do, folks, take a second, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you like this show. Actually, that's probably the first thing you do. It's just real quick. Bam, you see that thumbs up. Hit that thumbs up. Give us a like. We would greatly appreciate that. And it helps with the algorithm and all this other kind of stuff that I don't understand, but I just know it helps with the algorithm. And so do that. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you've not already done so, and share this show with your friends. And there's obviously two ways to do that. The one is physically share it. Click on it, share it, send it to people. The other one is tell people about what we got going on. Hey, you want really good analysis, honest analysis, talking ball, praise where it's deserved, criticism where it's warranted. You're going to get that at Irish Breakdown. So you definitely want to come check that out. So let those people know that that's what's going on.